everyone, and welcome back to another video. Today I've got my super nerdy glasses on because I'm getting ready to bring you guys a writing advice video. Wow, I know it's something that I almost never do on my channel here. I talk about my own writing a lot, but I seldom ever really give out writing tips or writing advice just because I feel like everyone's process is different and everyone's writing is going to look different. So what's really the point in giving someone writing advice when it may or may not apply to them? I mostly just like to talk about my process, and I guess to a certain extent I still kind of am doing that because I've been editing my manuscript for the past forever. It feels like I'm never gonna be done editing, but I see the end in sight, so woohoo for that. I've just been noticing some repetitive things in my manuscript that I wanted to share with you guys, and maybe just let you know, hey, if you're editing, these might be some things that you need to look out for in your writing when you're editing. So without further ado, let's get into that. So my first thing that I think you should look out for in your writing is your written accent. So I feel like this might be a term that I kind of made up in my books or in my own writing, but I feel like my writing has an accent, and that just means the way you talk might also be how you write. So when I talk, I tend to repeat myself a lot, and I've noticed that when my characters talk, they do the same thing, and that might not necessarily even be in character for them. That might just be me showing through their characters and their characterization. So I think it's really important to make sure when you're going back and editing dialogue or even narrative or thoughts or things like that, to make sure that everything fits in with the style of the characters and how they're speaking, and making sure, for me in my case, sometimes Shamira comes off an awful lot like she's talking like Jenna. So maybe making sure that everything Shamira says sounds like something Shamira would say and not something that Jenna would say, even though it is obviously going to have my style in it, and obviously the story is going to be written by me, so there's going to be a lot of me in the story. But in terms of characterization, it might not always make sense for a really shy character to come across really bold and bubbly in conversation, if you know what I mean. I also notice I use "oh" a lot when I'm speaking, or and I tend to write the same way that I speak. So every other sentence I've noticed my characters are like, "oh, and, oh, yes, and this, oh, why, oh, man, oh, this." "Oh" is kind of my buzzword. So when it comes to that, that's sort of like my written accent, if you will, when the way I talk naturally in real life shows up on the paper, and maybe it doesn't necessarily fit the style or the form or the tone of the scene. For instance, if I'm going to be sitting there like whatever, that might not make sense for someone in the 1st century to be speaking using that same kind of modern tone and modern language. It might if that's your writing style, but again, that's just something to look out for, is making sure that everything that's happening in your book is, sounds like it should be happening in your book, and not like it's something that belongs in a completely different genre. For instance, sometimes my characters have really witty conversation, but it sounds more like it belongs in a contemporary book than maybe necessarily a book about the 1st century. Just making sure that your tone and voice are accurate and that you don't have a written accent that very much shows who you are, what you're writing, and what you're like in real life. Making sure that everything your characters say is in character for them to say, if you know what I mean. The second thing that I've noticed a lot in my books is disappearing themes or disappearing motives, a case of missing identities, if you will. I brought in, when I started writing, a lot of different themes that I was like, this is going to be a great theme, and this is going to be a motif throughout the story, and this is going to be a symbol that we're going to refer to every chapter, and it's going to be in the title and everything. And then halfway through the manuscript, half of those things disappeared, or some things even just made a surprise appearance halfway through that was like, wait, there was no setup for that in the beginning of the book. So maybe as you're reading, try to make note, if you read through your manuscript when you're editing, try to make note of all the themes that you state kind of at the beginning, and then see if you followed through on those towards the end, because there is nothing worse than reading a book as a reader and getting really excited about a theme and wondering how it's going to play out, and then having the author never follow through with it, never finish it out, and being like, wait, but what about this? They never settled this, and all the things, they forgot to mention that. So that's just one of those things that maybe you should keep an eye out, We don't want missing posters or missing things all over the book. So make sure that everything is there and accounted for, present, and roll call, and all the things when you're writing. And the last thing that I think is really, really obvious when it comes to writing, but that you definitely need to keep an eye out for when you are working on your manuscript, is repetitive words and phrases. I know in my academic writing, at least in terms of my college papers, college essays, and research papers that I write, I know that I use however probably 2 or 3 times a paragraph in my first draft. And it's the same way in my fiction writing. Like I said earlier, I use oh a lot, but that's more of a conversational slang thing than necessarily a repetitive word, although it could be, and it is in some cases. So for me, those words are things like oh and however and therefore and thus. Those are all words that I tend to use way too much and way more than I need to. It's kind of like when you know people who are like comma happy and they have like a comma every couple words because we love commas. It's kind of like that, but with repetitive words. So maybe if you notice yourself doing like repeating the same word a lot, and if your word browser, Word doc, whatever has like a search feature, maybe try searching for, you know, typing in whatever, and then it'll show you like you used whatever in this document 400 times, and then go through and review them and maybe see like how many of those can be deleted or changed out for a different word, how many of them are really necessary, or how many of them really just don't belong there at all. They're just filler words, because that can be a thing that really kills a book, especially if you notice when you're reading something repeating a lot. I can't say the title, but and this isn't the actual word, but it's a similar word. They kept using the same phrase over and over again. Every time something would happen, the character would say, blimey. And it was just like, blimey this, blimey that. And it just kind of got a little bit under my skin. Once or twice is fine, especially if a character has like a buzzword or something, or a catchphrase. Like, you know, in Star Wars, like, what is the thing in Star Wars? I mean, it's not like, may the force be with you, but like, I have a bad feeling about this. Like, that's in all the Star Wars movies. I've got a very bad feeling about this and whatever. So like, that's cool because it's like a thing, it's a reference, it's a thing that they do throughout the story. But maybe if, you know, your character, like, if all your characters say like hopscotch 10,000 times in the manuscript, maybe go through and just make sure that every word that's there has a purpose and a reason for being there, and it's not filler, it can't be replaced, or that it belongs there, if you know what I mean. So those are 3 things that I think you should look out for in your writing. Those are 3 things that for me have been popping up consistently in my own editing as I've been editing my manuscript. There's lots of other things too, but it's mostly just grammar and structure and sentence structure and things, because rough drafts are not pretty at all. Those are the 3 main things that I have been having to go through in my manuscript and tone down. My 4th thing is melodrama, but I feel like that's just a me thing when I'm writing. When I'm writing my first draft, it tends to come out like a script for a soap opera. It's very overdramatic, and then I have to go through and tone everything down and be like, okay, I think the main characters had too much coffee today. What are some things, if you're a writer, that you notice you do a lot in your first drafts, or that come up frequently for you when you're editing? Or if you're a reader, do you have any pet peeves of things that you write or read when you're reading? Because I know I have a lot of things that bug me as a reader, like not using the Oxford comma or repetitive phrases and things like that. So if you have any readerly pet peeves when it comes to reading that you wish writers didn't do, or just if you're a writer and you have a lot of can relate, then please let me know in the comments down below. I promise I'm a writer, I'm just not very articulated when I'm speaking out loud. My name is Jenna Van Mourik. I'm an inspired writer and an inspirational fiction reader who reads, writes, and lives for Jesus. I'm kind of obsessed with Christian fiction and biblical fiction, so if you like that, make sure you subscribe and like this video for more content like this. You can find me on all of my social media links and handles over here. I post pretty much on the daily everywhere, except for here. This is like a weekly thing, but I'm active almost everywhere all the time, and I'm constantly sharing bookish things, book reviews, writing advice, and writing updates to all of my social media platforms. So if that sounds like, if any of those things sound like something you're interested in, then make sure you go and check out all of those links. The links will also be in the description box below with more information about me, who I am, what I do, my website, my social media, and my book club that I host. I host a biblical fiction book club on Goodreads, the Biblical Fiction Buffs. More information on that is in the description below again. So make sure you go and check out all of those things if any of that sounds like it might interest you. Once again, my name is Jenna Van Mourik. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you guys in my next video. Bye!